leaving it open, tell us more about the law and how we should understand perversion in relationship to law.
Yeah, that's a very, very wonderful and important question. It's a very complex, again, I think, to talk about law in Lacanian thinking, and especially to just sum it up in just a few minutes. But again, I can speak about it and share my thoughts about in response to the question in the context of perversion, in the context of the stadium perversion in relation to the law. So I will very specify it. Now, the law here is not, in this sense, it's not a small laws, right? Not the small laws that we know as a judicial laws, right? Don't steal it or don't kill it and things like that. The law here, in the Lacanian sense, influenced by Kant, is a form. So it's the form that acts as the law. So it's not something specific that is written, right? In order for that persists to institute as a law. It's the form that itself acts as a law, right? That is, I think that's what Lacan extracts from Kant. Now, that has a resonance with the superego, right? The superego, the form itself, the superego formulates and institutes its voice. That's the law. Now, I think what Lacan highlights here is that law is a purely unnecessary, almost, right? Purely extra, right? Purely waste. It's a pure waste, because why do we even need it in the first place? In order to produce jouissance, right? But it's a something extra, something supplementary, but it's almost necessary. It's a condition for perversion to take place. Perhaps not in psychosis, perhaps not in neurosis, but strangely enough, in perversion, this extra supplementary waste law is the precondition for perversion. And only then, I think, the jouissance can be produced. Without this form, perverts cannot do anything, right? Which is why I think that Lacan called jouissance and perversion is a supplementary jouissance. It's a surplus jouissance. And we can perhaps, in this sense, that distinguish, so-called jouissance, or I don't know if there's a normal jouissance, but if there's such a thing, from a surplus or supplementary jouissance. I can give you some examples, perhaps more literarily or textually. Let's think about sadomasoch, who, this where the masochism it comes from, right? We can also think about sad here, where the term sadism comes from. Again, what made render these two writers as a pervert or a sadist and masochist were not, in fact, their actual lifestyle, right? Sexual acts that they engage. For sadomasoch, it was really the written contractual agreement that he was instituting in each instant with a new partner. I think that I think it's a form, right? It's not like he's telling the partner or the new partner, I want this X sexual act or Y sexual act. The whole perverse act has to take place within this contractual form, which is a pure form. Sade said as well that I think that sexual education with a female partner, I think that was a symbolic form within which that sadist Saad's fantasy was possible. Without this symbolic form, I don't think that we, in this context, this is sadism, this is masochism in the Lacanian psychoanalysis. So I would have to say, when we talk about sadism or masochism or perversion in Lacanian sense, I think it has a particular context, particular kind of language that we have to incorporate and employ. So That's my thoughts. And so then the law here, again, it's a form, then it produces a surplus jouissance. It's all about the waste. It's all about supplementarity. I think that's what distinguishes Lacan's idea of enjoyment and perverse enjoyment from the other kinds of enjoyment or jouissance.
It's not simply about what acts. And, typically, if you think about many diagnostic systems and their approaches to perversion, they want to try and get a sense of what acts, are they normal, are they problematic, rather than looking at the form of the relationship to the other. So that's great. Here then's the next question. And, we've looked at this, I've mentioned this quote to you before, but I found this one description that Bruce Fink provides quite useful. And he says, the pervert engages in an attempt to supplement the paternal function that brings the symbolic other into existence. The pervert does it by staging or enacting the enunciation of the law. So there's at least two elements there. I mean, just one is the paternal function, which I'm hoping you may have something to say about, and also that idea of enacting or the enunciation of the law. I mean, maybe take them one at a time or however you would, but I'm interested in both of those.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. The first one was paternal function, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question is whether perversion has some sort of paternal function.
Yeah, supplement how it well, for Fink at least, the pervert attempts to supplement the paternal function.
And first, then, what is paternal function in the first place? Of course, Lacan discussed paternal function, or paternal metaphor, of course, in his seminar, in relation to object and again within the Oedipus complex. But without even going into that all in details, I think my answer was already there in my previous answer to your question, right? The form, actually. Mm-hmm. So again, here I would classify the paternal function, not the paternal figure, but paternal function is not in the subject. In other words, it would be very, very easy for us to say the pervert is here than paternal, right? Paternal agent or subject, because presumably again, or from the outset, he or she takes the position of the giving a law, right? At the very immediate sense. Then we can easily make this quick connection is the pervert qua the paternal. But I don't think that's the case in the Lacanian in the Lacanian sense. Again, here I think the perversion in the pervert in Lacanian sense is a purely instrumental agent that listens to the voice of the big other, not the partner, the other, small other, that whom he exercises his right to enjoyment. It is something else, the other, big other out there, and that I would call a form, right? So I'd agree with in what Bruce Fink said in the quote is that there is a paternal function, paternal law even, that stages or enacts certain kind of a legal form, right? I think that's what I think it's a paternal law and paternal form in perversion. So it's not the agent, it's not the subject, it's not the sadist, it's not the masochist. It's again linking to the voice of the cruelty, voice of the critical agency, that's the big other, the whatever that might be. Then here it brings to another dimensionality of perversion. I think at this point is that is there more than two people in perversion, right?
Yeah, it also makes me think, actually, having asked the question, I suppose now I'm listening to you speaking, I think number one that was useful, particularly useful, was again some of your earlier thoughts on the Oedipus complex. And I suppose also one way of thinking about the supplementation of the paternal function maybe helps us in a kind of differential diagnostic between psychosis and perversion, and for that matter, neurosis, because you would have to say that in neurosis, the paternal function has been implemented and works, is the name of the father. In psychosis, no, it's foreclosed. So the name of the father being foreclosed means the paternal function isn't potentially working. And in perversion, yeah, the paternal function does minimally operate, but it needs supplementation. It needs constant supplementation because it's not adequately rooted, installed. And I suppose that also helps illuminate something else in that Fink quote, because he says the pervert engages in an attempt to supplement, okay, the little mini, hardly operative paternal function, but also to do so in order to bring the symbolic other into existence. Which is kind of it's almost like the instantiation, the enunciation, the enactment of the perverse act is kind of, in a way, both, you could say, maybe the conduit of the other's jouissance, enjoyment, but it also, in a sense, could be said to be trying to call that big other into a kind of existence. What about this idea of the enunciation of the law? Or maybe I'm also interested in how is it that in perversion, the position of a witness seems to be necessary?
Yeah, I think it's nicely actually tied to, again, reflecting our this conversation about the law. So I just actually raised the question to myself, is there more than two people in perversion? And not people, I should say, I don't know, whatever, the entities, it's not people. You know, I think it's a very interesting question, and I'm not trying to reduce perversion again to some sort of cultural kind of practice of sexuality, anything like that. But in contemporary sexual practice, I think this question of witness or a third entity that is either abstract or voice or whatever, or superego, I think it's really, really interesting, because the sexual practice has been really changed and different from so-called normative, right, heterosexual two-person, you know, whatever. I'm thinking of here, I'm thinking of, first of all, Freud's essay, Child is Being Bitten. Because I think this is where, that's one of the, again, primary texts that Freud formulates, this sadism and masochism, in the division of activity and passivity, reversibility of these two, but within the Oedipus complex, right? That's a resolution of the Oedipus complex. But what is really interesting about the child is being bitten is that child develops a sexual beating fantasy, but not because child is being beaten. It is not the child who's being beaten, right, has this beating fantasy. It's rather the child who's watching the other child's being beaten, right? So here we have three entities here, right? Actually the beaten child and the father figure, or paternal figure, authority figure, or superegoic figure that conducts beating. Now we have another child who's a spectator, and this is the child, the third entity, that actually enjoys, right? Gets the enjoyment. So it's almost as if like the beating child is an instrument here for really not the other. If there's the other, it's the other child who's a spectator. So here I think about then witness perversion. The question is, whose enjoyment is this?